Okay, we have a couple of farmers who are going to tell us a bit about their operation and various aspects of carbon farming as well, Stuart, where that fits in. Anyway, we have Stuart Crosthwaite and Scott McKillop. I don't have a bio for Scott at all, but in general terms, they are farmers in the Kiewa Valley, Gundowring area. I know where Stuart is. Dairy farmers. Stuart's done a couple of things off-farm. He's worked in sort of more research side, but eventually ended up on the family farm. And if you two would like to come up and give your presentation.
Firstly, thanks for inviting us along. It gets us out of the afternoon milking, which is good. We were asked to talk about the modern dairy farm and where the modern dairy farm might be in 10 or 20 years' time. And when you start thinking, well, when I started thinking about that, and Scotty, it's no different to, I really don't think the modern dairy farm in the future will be any different to what we're doing now. It's all like the picture there. There's some good operators that are just about to take off and some not so good operators that are about to burn. So like the plane diag picture, why not invest in a dairy business? It's, this is Scotty's favourite picture, and why he's a dairy farmer. But it's like an airline. It's about doing the basics really well. It's about understanding what the key drivers of your industry and your business are, and it's no different from either an airline or a dairy farm. Let's not pigeonhole ourselves into an industry that is special, and we have a certain set of negative things that are going to influence us. And too often, particularly on the radio and so on, we hear so much negative stuff. And from our point of view, there's a lot more positives than negatives. And look, if you don't enjoy it, go and do something else. Go and fly a plane, or go and watch the ladies dancing around the pole. But enjoy it. It's exciting. Particularly in the dairy industry, we've got an amazing array of technology that we can implement and adapt on our farms, and with that, it's very productive. The potential in the northeast in particular, and we're here to, I suppose, fly the flag for that part of the world, but we really think it's probably untapped potential here in the northeast. And Scotty and I, both on our farms, have lifted production quite dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years, and there's no reason why other parts of the area can't do as well. We know it's very, very profitable if you've got your farm set up and working right. And if you're adopting the technology and you're investing in your business, dairying's great because it's so responsive. You can see an improvement in the milk vat tomorrow by doing something today. So why wouldn't you dairy farm in the northeast? When you really have a cold hard think about it, we've got a great set of resources. Land's pretty cheap relatively around the state. We've got great access to high quality water. I think we've got a really reliable climate. We always have a wet winter, and on the back of that wet winter we always have some sort of silage harvest, and then we use that to manage through the summer. And it's a beautiful area to live, and it took both of us to go and work away from our farms to realise that the northeast had, was a great part of the world to live. And we also, being in the dairy industry, we have a great service centre in Albury-Wodonga and a great pool of potential labour, and we know it's productive and profitable. So getting back to what the modern dairy farm will be, today's dairy farm, or tomorrow's dairy farm, will have a similar set of figures like this that we think, undermine what a really profitable dairy farm is today. So today, we need to be getting around that 550 plus kilos of milk solids per cow per year, which in litres figures is around 7.5 plus thousand litres per cow per year. Per cow pasture consumption, so this is a figure that we want to see the cow's diet made up predominantly of pasture. So it's okay to have trucks coming in and bringing feed into the farm, but to be profitable and to be sustainable on a dairy farm here in the northeast, you need to be diluting that a lot with pasture. Farming's about being disciplined, and it's like flying the plane. That pilot needed to be a bit more disciplined, but the farmers need to be disciplined with how much debt they take on, so you can service what you've got and be able to feed the family. And cost of production, given that we've diluted a lot of the diet with cheap pasture, we need to have a low-cost dairy system. And we need to set our farm up. So in the northeast, we generally have conservative stocking rates, and we need to be strict with that. We need to understand that we've got a variable climate within the seasons, and our stocking rate's there to cater for that. Calving dates and patterns, and we're adapting to climate change. We're now seeing, I don't know whether it's climate change or just good management, but when you're improving your farm and getting better pasture species on your farm, you're starting to grow a lot more through those colder months. So we're going to do a bit of a tag team. Scotty?
So actually, Stewie and I are neighbours and grew up together, so we've known each other for our whole lives and possibly longer. So Stewie said, it's discipline. It's about discipline in any business, regardless of what you're doing. We are running a business. It's not just running a farm for the sake of running a farm and having a nice lifestyle. We're running a business. John Mulvaney, who's probably the preeminent dairy consultant in Victoria, he said to us that probably only 5% of farmers he deals with actually deal with cash flow budgets, which is a pretty staggering figure. That was dairy farmers. Quite a few people are used to handling them when they know the key settings, so they may not use them as often, but I know Stewie does and we do. I'm on my budget every couple of nights, adjusting things and altering what we've got. So watch and monitor your cash flow, and we deal in a volatile trading environment. We're about to probably see a 15 to 20% reduction in our milk price coming from the 1st of July. So having an understanding of what drives your profit and this 2020 focus is really important, because when we're going to see this drop in our income, possibly in the vicinity of $150,000 in the coming season, nothing else changing, you have to know what your key drivers are of the profit on your farm. So making good decisions on time become even more important, and don't make it overcomplicated. You don't have to make it too complicated. It's a pretty simple system, as Stewie said, of getting good cows, growing grass, grazing that grass and turning it into milk. So, but having a good understanding of the basic things that drive your profit is very important. Do the simple things really well. I come from an animal nutrition and an agronomy background after I left uni. So growing and utilising as much feed per hectare, the most profitable dairy farmers in the state, regardless of what area you're in, are the ones who grow the most grass and utilise the most grass, not just grow it but actually use it. And that can either be through direct harvest by cows grazing it, or through phytoconservation of silage and hay and so forth. We need to understand the climate you're working in, and you need to be adaptable. Understand the soil types on your property, understand their strengths and weaknesses. Set certain parts of your farm up for winter production according to how well the soils are drained, whether it's a red soil, a dark soil. Match your pasture species to your soil types on your farm, so you can maximise the amount of grass you can grow during the season. There's a thing in the dairy industry we've been using, which has been rolled out in recent probably 5 years or so, Stu, called FPFP, or Feeding Pastures for Profit. It's a really good principle set up by some guys from the DPI, and they're also farmers themselves, which schools people up on understanding basically mainly around ryegrass pastures, but how to manage those pastures and get the most out of them. So a well-run grazing management practice is very important. What's the weather like a hawk? We've all got smartphones and these things these days, or mobiles, computers and so forth. There's no excuse for not getting seed or fertiliser or something out on time these days. There's that many forecasts you can look at. We've probably got about 10 between us that we consult at various different times. But make sure you're well resourced in keeping an eye on what the weather does, because that is really critical in getting those timely things right. The other important thing is a good quality herd of cows. We need good quality genetics in the cows that we're milking to make sure they have the ability to convert the feed that we're growing into as much milk as possible. I think sometimes there's this little comic shows here, cows are smarter than we give them credit for. But innovation on farm is really important. Reproductive management is something that's becoming harder and harder in the dairy industry, probably because we're getting cows that are producing more and more milk over a lactation. So with those higher milk production levels come increased challenges in terms of the nutritional requirements of the animal, and therefore trying to get those cows back in calf, because without cows in calf we can't keep going. So there's big challenges with that. There's a lot of international genetics that we utilise these days, and there's also a lot of genomics also coming into the system, which is the genetic screening, I suppose, of both cows and pastures. There's a fair bit being done in pasture systems as well. Within the dairy industry and the beef industry too, there would have been, I think, progeny test systems where young bulls might be identified as coming on as being the next big thing. The genomics actually accelerates that process, and they're actually selecting bulls without having to go through the years and years and years of progeny testing to actually work out whether that bull is going to be good enough or not through actual physical evaluation. It's the DNA profile of those animals that's actually alerting us to who's the best up front, and that's therefore accelerating the rates of gain in reproductive performance in the industry. Efficiency on farm is certainly something I think dairy farmers are pretty good at taking up. Robotics is one that's starting to take on a little bit more. Also, there's a lot more labour-saving equipment. Stewie's just put in a fairly big new dairy. There's a lot of labour-saving equipment that we can utilise in the dairy industry to make our job that bit easier and also more enjoyable, probably.
Continually investing in your business. If we're not throwing money at our farms, they're becoming unattractive to pass on to the next generation. And I think that's half the problem with a lot of the farms that are going out of the industry. They've stopped investing in their business, and in particular, when we came home, I know our pastures had really deteriorated, and so we've spent a lot of time over the last 6 years improving pastures, infrastructure in the dairy. If the dairy's not up to speed and it takes you 4 hours to milk the cows, it's not that much fun. So there needs to be that continual investment to keep that sort of equipment up to speed. And the herd and the cattle, I won't go on about what Scotty was just saying, but I reckon it's amazing that in our dairy farm over the last 4 or 5 years we've used semen from bulls from Germany and Italy and Canada and the UK and America and even a few from Australia. And we can pick cows. We're selecting cows for bigger muzzle width, which, more feed per bite. And it gets down to that sort of fine-tuning. Efficiency, making work easier. We've just invested just over $1 million in a new dairy, and we've primarily done that to make life easier and give us a little bit more, work-life balance. Succession and business structure, there's some, the previous governments have set up some amazing rules with superannuation and so on, and tax to be managing your business. And I'd strongly advise anyone that's, looking to move their business onto the next generation or to someone else, there's some amazing structures out there to investigate. And something I talk about is, some farmers get a bit carried away feeding the best pellet or grow the best ryegrass. I reckon finding the sweet spot between the per hectare stuff and the per cow stuff, and the work-life balance. It's pretty important. Something that as we get bigger and bigger, we're finding we have to rely a little bit more on human resources, and it's getting harder and harder to find decent human resources. So a few of the key messages we wanted to say today was, a successful modern dairy business is about surrounding yourself with good people, and don't rely on doing everything yourself. And, there are contractors out there to do certain jobs that we get in to do things. A lot of farmers need to probably improve their skills in terms of employing people, and I think a lot of that is just finding the right person in the first place. Retention of staff's commonly an issue, and being a good employer. And yourself, just within yourself, make sure you listen to everyone and take some advice on. Don't think you know it all. I'll keep moving because I know we're running short of time. Dairying in the northeast, we know dairy is about a 3 times better wealth creator than any other grazing alternatives. So why aren't people growing, expanding and looking at the northeast? And to be honest, I can't really understand. I can't really answer that. But I can say that, don't underestimate people. I think, the more and more it becomes exposed, how profitable it can be, people will follow those opportunities and chase it. And the current climate of those feeding pastures for profit courses and DBNs, which is dairy business networks, provide the core skills that farmers need. And on the back of those, over the last sort of 6 years, we've seen motivation, enthusiasm and investment levels growing. And particularly, the Midder Valley is a good example. We've seen the Midder community actually come to Murray Goulburn and say, we need dairy back. We've seen services decline and we need dairy prospering because it employs people, it spends money in the community as well. And growing dairy, it's, I think, little bits, bit by bit, and I think in some corners of the area we're talking about, changing culture and doing things in a different way.
As Stewie said, attracting the right people to seek a career in dairy industry is sometimes difficult. We've both been involved in a system called Cows Create Careers, where we give calves to local high schools and students rear those calves and have them for 3 weeks, and we go and give presentations and so forth. It's a good way of getting another positive message out to the community. A lot of those kids are city kids, or town kids, I suppose, so they enjoy the hands-on process of actually getting out there and getting a feel for what we do. So it's hard to change those perceptions, but I think through some of these types of things we can address some of those barriers to growth that might see a greater development of the dairy industry in the northeast. Sustainable dairy farm, I really like. I'm glad Snow said it was hard to follow on from Mick, but it's harder to follow on from a professor. But what we're saying basically is that profitability and sustainability have to go hand in hand. We have to be profitable to be sustainable, and that is from a business point of view, an environmental point of view as well. So if the land and the farm is not healthy, then it's not productive. So as custodians of the land, we have to look after the land to pass on to our next generations. I'm 5th generation in our region, and Stewie's probably 4th. So it's important that we pass on the land in as good a quality, or preferably better, than the way we were handed it as youngsters. So a well-run farm, waterways fenced off, stock need water reticulation, shade resources in the summer to keep them healthy and cool. And we also have to comply with a lot of regulations, whether they be EPA and so forth. So we are a fairly heavily regulated industry. In terms of energy use, it's in our business interest to reduce it. And I think, just from listening this afternoon, certainly I think what we can do directly ourselves, rather than the sequestration type arrangements, cutting our own costs with physical things that we can do on our farms that stay on our farms, I think are much more useful than on the speculative market of whether the carbon price is going to go up and down. So things like solar, variable speed drives and vacuum pumps and these types of things that cut our energy consumption and our power use, reusing and capturing heat, some of these types of things. And there's also industry research happening on lowering cow emissions, as Mick alluded to, but also recycling of nutrients and managing those nutrients better. So the sustainable farm, just to finish it up, and trying to get this family farm continuing in the region. The succession farming issue is certainly a difficult thing to tackle. It can be for some. It's a hard road to go down. It can take 2 or 3 years, but it's certainly worth it in the long run. And there are some new ways and innovative ways of seeking some of the alternative business structures, such as share farming or leasing or putting a manager on or some other means of making sure the farm you have, if it is currently a dairy farm, can continue to be a dairy farm in this area, because as Stewie and I both enjoy doing what we do locally, and we'd like to see the industry continue to prosper into the future. So that is all we have for you this afternoon. Thank you.